believe we are good. All right. Thank the Lord. I believe we've got our sound working. Thanks to all of you who come out. Thanks to you who view the streams. We appreciate your support. We're in the book of Isaiah this evening, and we are talking about, "To whom will ye liken me, saith the Lord? To whom will you liken me and make me equal?" This morning we talked about the fact that God knows us from the very beginning, that he has born us in the belly, he's carried us in the womb. He says he's going to be with us even while we're getting older and even to the very end. He says, "I will carry and deliver you." And that's a wonderful promise to us. We thankful that if we put our trust in God, that he can carry and deliver us. And we compare that to the gods of Baal and Nebo, who really were a burden more than they were anything. They laden down the oxen and the beasts. They were a lot more of a burden than they were a help. And we compare that to God and his wonderful mercy and power in our lives. And so this evening, God asks a very simple question. He says, "To whom will ye liken me?" You know, we compare things all the time. There's probably a comparison that you've made today, and probably many of them. We compare different talents. You know, they'll give awards for people that do well in a competition, and so we compare them and we decide which ones we like better. Probably each one of us will have something that we consider a favorite, maybe a favorite color or a favorite drink or a favorite food. There are things that we have compared and found something to be better for some reason or another. Maybe we believe that it tastes better, or maybe that we believe that it's just more healthy, or whatever the case may be. Each one of us comes to a decision about a certain item. Of course, we make decisions about all kinds of things. They go to a lot more serious things than foods. You have foods in schools and churches and politicians and all these different things we compare. We compare different activities. Some people love to fish. Some people love to hunt. Some people love to work on the computer, and some people love construction work, and some people love to work with their hands and to make things, to sew and to knit and those type of things. Or some people that love to cook and all kinds of different things. We make comparisons about different things. Now then, of course, you've probably went to purchase something or to go to visit somewhere, and there's a comparison that we make often, at least in my life and probably yours as well. You'll go to some review about something and you'll try to get an idea about what other people thought about this particular product. You know, how long did it last? How well was it made? Was it worth the money? All of these different things. Why? Because we are comparing. We're comparing things. And this evening, I want to compare something that's far greater than foods and schools and politicians and all those other things. We want to compare things spiritually. You want to compare things spiritually. "To whom will ye liken me and make me equal?" This is God's question. This is the question this evening. Who will you liken God to? Now, of course, we have lots of things that people have created in life. They come up with these fantasy-type stories, and perhaps you've seen different things. There's science fiction out there. It's usually where you start to get to these very outlandish things. You know, you get into aliens and continental warfare and all these different things. And a lot of times people get very interested in things of magic, and it's one of the reasons why the things are so popular. That because people are trying to get a hold of something that's greater than they are. Try to find something that they can lean on, because life is difficult. Life doesn't always go the way that we think it should. You know, sometimes we don't win the game. Sometimes we lose. Sometimes a person isn't healthy. They get sick. And sometimes people don't get better. Sometimes people die. And sometimes the financial situations do become an issue, and homes get foreclosed on, and bankruptcies get filed, because it doesn't always work the way that we expected it to. And sometimes people do get addicted to things they never thought they'd get addicted to. And sometimes people do end up in jail. Sometimes people get tickets, and sometimes divorces happen. It wasn't the way it was supposed to work. And so we're constantly looking for something that is greater than ourselves to put our confidence in. And so the world comes up with its fantasies. I call them fantasies because that's what they are. Not really real. We like to hope that they were. And like I said, it's one of the reasons that people become very interested in witchcraft and sorcery and magic. Why? Because it seems greater than they are. That somebody can wave a wand and things get better, and that someone can cast a spell and it's all better, and the enemy's defeated and things are good, and people are healthy again. It seems a wondrous thing, and it's something that many people begin to count on, and some people get into these things. I remember when I was working out in New Mexico, there was a witchcraft was a very big thing. Besides, there was these people called medicine men. Medicine men, obviously, most of us would be familiar with them, at least to a bit. A lot of these medicine men hold great power among most of the tribes, and they often are involved in spiritism. I remember talking to a man that was talking about a situation where his parents actually went to a medicine man, and this man that was telling me this story was a young boy when this happened. He was very sick, and his parents, he was a Navajo man, his parents took him to a medicine man. And this medicine man began to do these things and try to do these things and help him as he was sick. And something happened as he was doing his little things and the different spells and techniques and stuff that he was using. A fire broke out in their house, and it burned a hole in the floor. And this man's parents were so upset about it, they threw the medicine man outside the house. They were upset and frustrated because the boy wasn't healed and there was a hole in the floor, and so they rejected the traditional ways. This man's parents would later become Christians and find God, and this young man would find God. And all of a sudden they found something that was real, something where God's presence was in their life. But the man that was telling me this was also telling me about the different medicine men across the different tribes. I believe it was in the Sioux Indians and some others, that they would literally take pacts with the devil, and that they often were murderers involved in this. They would literally kill people in their attempts to get power. He would say very much so the medicine men among the Indians had a lot of power. It was in demonic worship, satanic worship. Why? Because people seek for power. They want something that works, something that they can at least believe some kind of false hope in. And so people get involved into all kinds of different things, trying to find hope in something. And so you probably talked to somebody that was in astrology and all the different signs, and I don't know them all, but there's a few. They have all of them. I think there's a Cancer and a Taurus, and I think a Scorpio, and some people would know them much better than I do. But there's all these different astrological signs. There's people that study the stars and see how they line up, and people that will read your wrist, so to speak. They'll look at it and try to tell you about your life, and people that will use tarot cards and all kinds of things. Why? Because they're trying to tap into a power greater than they are. They're looking for something. But the sad thing is that often what comes back is nothing. They find very little to help them in their real life. A lot of times it becomes like this man's parents that took him to the medicine man to be healed. All they came up with was a fire and a burning in their floor. And this is what happens so often. People cast themselves into all these different things. They think they'll find hope, and they hope they'll find happiness. And so often they find shattered dreams and regret and things they'd much rather forget. I've talked about it many times, but a lot of times when a person meets what they thought would be their greatest success, their greatest achievement in life, they often find shattered dreams. Besides, there are actually 2 points where a person is the most prime time when they will probably commit suicide. It will be in one of 2 options. One of the deepest parts of their life where they feel depressed, or it will be when they achieved what they thought would be the greatest achievement in their life and find that it didn't satisfy. It's a very interesting story about Alexander the Great. You may not know much about Alexander the Great, but at the age of 33, he was a Greek commander, and at that time he had conquered literally what was known of all the world. Basically, as far as they were concerned, all of the known world was in his power. And at the age of 33, Alexander the Great wept, not because he lost the battle, but because he said there were no worlds left to conquer. He had conquered all of the known world. The Greek Empire was one of the largest empires in the world. Of course, they had no idea about the Western Hemisphere, but he had conquered all of the known world that they knew about. And he wept there were no more lands left to conquer. And Alexander the Great, after conquering all of the known worlds, he committed suicide. Why? Because he had achieved what he thought would be the greatest challenge in life, and it hadn't satisfied the need of his heart. Many times there have been people that have won medals and accomplished dreams and found it not satisfying. It hadn't satisfied their greatest yearnings in life. You'll find that often athletes will have difficulty retiring because it's hard to get away from what they poured their life into. But often, when you look back, a lot of athletes will look back on their former sports life and begin to wonder whether it was worth it. They faced all kinds of medical issues. Many faced knee issues and brain issues and all kinds of things. And all of a sudden, their name's not on the big screens anymore, and all of a sudden, people don't care what's going on in their lives anymore. They become another name, another number. That's really the world's way of things. The way the world does things is you're useful to the world as long as you're giving something to them. As long as you're giving entertainment, or as long as your money is being poured into their events and into their things, then you're welcome. As long as there's a few fins you tag along, and you're welcome. As long as you pour money into their alcohol and their drugs and their cigarettes, you're welcome. Come right along. You'll fit right in. Jesus tells the disciples, if you were of the world would love his own. They'll find a way to accept you. Come right in. Except for at the center of the world and all of the world's pleasures, we find heartache, grief, sorrow, sin, loss, broken relationships, broken dreams. And that's at the center of the world's core. They promise you the world. You've probably seen books that are get rich quick and do this and that. And there's books about health. We find many of it becomes a fantasy. People don't really get rich quick. Relationships don't just heal overnight. Sometimes the health begins to deteriorate instead of improve. The spiritual hunger and the spiritual despair doesn't go away. The depression sinks in. I'm telling you what happens when you trust in the world's fantasies, because really that's all it is. Baal and Nebo, who we talked about this morning, the gods of Israel, they were just fantasies. They did nothing at all for them. They literally had no impact on the things that were important, because the thing that's really important is serving God. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 20, it tells us, "For the invisible things of God are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, so that they are without excuse, even His eternal power in Godhead." But the world looks out and rejects the things of God and make up their own fantasy life. And so a lot of people chase all kinds of things. They chase the astrologers. They chase the magic. They chase all of the little books and stories about these philosophers and these people that did these great things. And they find nothing. But God says, "To whom will you liken me?" in Isaiah chapter 46 and verse 5. "And compare me that we may be like." We'll read the next few verses here because I want to make sure we get this comparison clear. It says, "They lavish gold." This is in verse 6 of Isaiah chapter 46. "They lavish gold out of the bag and weigh silver in the balance and hire a goldsmith. And he maketh a god. They fall down, yea, they worship. They bear him upon their shoulder. They carry him and set him in his place. And he standeth from his place, shall he not remove. Yea, one shall cry unto him, yet can he not answer, nor save him out of his trouble." You see, all this baggage, this God they have to carry around, this fantasy they have to carry along, these dreams they have to carry along. And yet, the fantasy can't answer. No matter how much you believe in a certain thing doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I can believe that I'm going to be a millionaire, but it won't change the fact that it won't change my bank account. It'll still be the same that it was. I can believe, and we can set up these fantasies, but there's no real power in that. Let's read verse 8 and 9. It says this, "Remember this and show yourselves men. Bring it again to mind, O you transgressors. Remember the former things of old. For I am God, and there is none else. I am God, and there is none like me, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things that are not yet done, saying, My counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure." God says, remember the former things of old. God hasn't changed this evening. Now, we may have rejected God and the things of the Lord. God hasn't changed, though. The same God that Isaiah predicted that all of these things would happen, especially when we looked at Isaiah 45, when he talked about Cyrus being raised up and Cyrus rebuilding and setting up the foundation of the temple, and how the nations wouldn't be able to stand before Cyrus. And we find that those things happened. It wasn't when Isaiah wrote it, even though he mentioned the exact person by name. It would be almost 200 years later, during the time of the Medium-Persian Empire, shortly before the time of Darius. You'll remember him. He was the king when Daniel was thrown in the lion's den. God says, I've declared all of these things. I want to tell you that Isaiah and many of the prophets are one of the greatest proofs that you have that there is an all-powerful God at stake. That God can name the exact person that would set the temple's foundations before 200 years before it would happen. That God could show all of the prophecies that would happen around Jesus over 600 years before it happened, sometimes 1,000, and even some of them up to 4,000 years before it happened. Why? Because there was an all-powerful God in control. The all-powerful God that could open the eyes of the blind and make the lame to walk and call out unclean spirits. This was the God that Isaiah was talking about, that could make a widow's meal last for a very long time, until the end of the famine. Why? Because there was a God in control. That would tell a widow where her husband had died, and he'd been a man of God, to go out and borrow vessels, and borrow not a few, and they could fill them with oil, and all of them would fill before the oil would stay. She'd be able to go out and sell them and make the money needed to pay off the creditors and to live her life. The God that can make the axe float and could cause the sun to stand still in the battle for Joshua, and could cause the walls of Jericho to fall down. That God that rained down hailstones from heaven to help them. This was the God, the all-powerful God. This wasn't a fantasy. You see, the biggest difference between the world's powers and God's powers is that God is all-powerful. God is able to cause councils to stand and fall. God is able to make the things that aren't as though they are. There's an astounding statement that's said about God in Romans. And it's talking about Abraham. And Abraham's believing that God, they said God calls those things that be not as though they are. He's able to change the very circumstances of life. It's not a fantasy. It's a reality. This morning, or this evening, are you serving God? See the ruler of your life? God says, who are you going to compare me to? Well, you can name any leader of all of history and they wouldn't compare to God. You can name any amazing storm that's came through, maybe Hurricane Katrina or some great tornado or some tsunami, some great earthquake, but it wouldn't compare to the power of God. God is able to change lives, to set the captive free, to do the most needed thing that a person needs, and that is to have salvation. To change a person's life by the blood of Jesus Christ, to fill them with the Holy Spirit of God, and to set them on the path of life. Is your trust in God this evening? It says, to whom will you liken me? There's no power in this world that can be likened to God. More powerful than anything you can imagine or think of. Any fantasy God that created the world. The all-powerful God. Pray you'll put your trust in Him. Let Him guide your life. And if you've not, you can make Him the ruler of your life this evening. Thanks to all of you who come out. Thanks to you who view the streams. We appreciate your support. Pray that you put your trust in God. Pray that you'll be prayed up, blessed up, and ready to go up. Have a wonderful evening.